Hey folks, today I am going to be presenting for you a player who could be considered the first world champion unofficially. It was before they had a world chess championship contest. And he was certainly somebody who actually did not consider themselves to be a professional chess player and refused to ever take any money for playing chess. But he was certainly clearly decisively by a wide Marin the strongest player of his time, and that is the American Paul Morphy. Paul Morphy's chess development was an incredible thing. Basically, he learned how to play chess as a kid by watching his dad and his uncle play chess. Just by watching them, not even playing himself. Then at some point they realized that the little kid knew how to play, when he was watching one of their games, and said after they agreed a draw. He was like, Ernesto could have won, and they said how you know, so he then replayed the whole game for them to show them how Ernest could have won the game. And then they realized not only does he already know how to play chess but he's better than us. And so he played quite a bit for a couple years as a kid and became basically the strongest player around as far as anyone knew. But then from the age of 13 to 20 he played very little chess. Studying, going to school, going to law school, becoming a lawyer. And at the age of 20 with very little chess practice even. He traveled to Europe and just crushed every single chess player there. The players who were considered the best players in the world. Except for one named Staunton who avoided playing him. Ducked the match. He would have beaten him of course, and Morphy was hundreds of points stronger than anyone else in the world at that point. I think Morphy's play was definitely limited by the fact that he didn't face much opposition, and so he went through most of his career playing quickly. He just wasn't really challenged that much. So from age 20 to 21 he dominated the chess world and played a lot of games which are famous to this day, and today we will look at my favorite game of his. In this game he is playing black against Louis Pson. And it starts out with a 4 knights opening, which was common back then. Very uncommon now at high levels. In this position here Morphy should not capture the knight back because of the pawn fork, which will recover the piece that white has sacrificed and then leave white with a central advantage with this pawn here left in the center. So instead of taking it he simply moved his rook to e8. Just continuing his development, and white took here. But let me just show you, white could have kept their extra pawn by retreating the knight attacking the bishop, so black doesn't have time to take here. And then black would move the bishop back and now white could defend this pawn, for example with rook to e1. But Morphy already understood that in a position like this the knight on d3 would block the pawn on d2, would block the bishop on c1, would block the rook on a1, and would really hurt white's entire development of his game. Okay, so Morphy knew that he would have good play here if white held onto the pawn like that. That's the kind of idea that Morphy was really introducing into chess. And here you know, similarly, let's say white tried to hang on to their pawn, they could put the bishop on d3 to defend this pawn, right? But again, same development problems, and surprisingly enough Paulson showed himself aware that bishop d3 wasn't good and he went to e2, allowing Morphy to recover the pawn he sacked. And so we get to this position here, and here Pson makes a mistake with c3. This is the first moment in the game where Morphy really does something important and gets a good advantage, so I thought I would give you a chance to try and predict his move here. See if Morphy's wisdom and knowledge has been passed down through the generations 150 years to you and found its way into your head. Do you know what to do here? If you do, it's because 150 years ago Paul Morphy showed us what to do here. Alright, so the move that Morphy played is queen to d3. And this is a move aimed at restricting the opponent's development by blocking this pawn, and that's why c3 was a really bad move. And what should white have preferred here? d3 right, to allow his pieces out even if it's very modest in terms of the presence in the center. Instead white goes for c3 hoping for d4, but spoiler alert, he's not going to get to play d4 in time in this game. So Morphy shuts that down, and now white is really struggling to get his queenside pieces out, so he fights with a4, and now comes a really nice calm massing by Morphy over the next two moves. Just improving these pieces, coordinating them, streamlining them. It's not yet clear where he's going to attack, but I believe that he already had in mind what he was going to do to win the game. So Paulson here plays queen a6, challenging the queen right. And if Morphy's queen moves away he'll be able to play d4 and bring his rook into the action along the second rank. So here Morphy thought for 12 minutes. 12 minutes was kind of a record for Morphy. That's why people bothered to make a note of it and pass down that info that Morphy thought for 12 minutes on this move. And that gets back to what I was saying before about how Morphy really didn't have good enough opposition to develop as a chess player. He was used to playing so quickly because he really wasn't challenged. So here he thought for 12 minutes, and I think it's because he probably was calculating the game all the way out to a forced win pretty much. So do you have any ideas what he did here? I'm about to show it, so this is your last chance to pause, if you want to try and guess this brilliancy for yourself. He sacrificed his queen. And this is rendered possible by the fact that having blockaded White's queen's side pieces with his pawn on d2, for while White has more than half his army out of play. And so Morphy is able to conduct an attack in this position here with basically just a bishop against a queen because White's pieces are so out of place. Morphy is attacking with 2 bishops and 2 rooks against a rook and 1 or 2 pawns. Plus you know the queen could sack herself at some point for a bishop or so, there's no question that he's got a strong enough attack here. But Morphy was probably just being a little bit careful calculating a couple variations because there's one interesting defense here for White which White didn't play in the game. White plays rook d1. First of all, here is not a very good defense. I'm sure this wouldn't have cost Morphy very long to calculate that if White tries to oppose the black rook by trading away his rook, White opens up the back rank for checkmate. But an interesting defense for White would have been to play in this position here, his queen to d3, and the idea is that he stops Black's checkmate threat because he can sack his queen here now. Even this position is pretty decent for Black, but I believe Morphy was probably calculating and planning this variation. Here f5 denying the queen sack and then queen check trying to come to f7 to take this rook again. The king goes to f8 himself to keep the white queen out, so I think that's probably the variation that Morphy was calculating. In any case, in the game White plays rook to d1 here and checks. Checks king back, so you see he's got the white king pretty well corralled here, with all his pieces, so he was just grabbing that f3 pawn for free. With those 2 checks, and now he plays bishop takes f2 with the threat of checkmating 1 on g2. And White has no good defense against this and gave back the queen. Morphy took it, so at this point Morphy's up 2 pawns, so he could win in a variety of uninteresting ways. But I'm going to show you the end because he won in a very nice way. Very good technical move here. Rook to e2 again, preventing this poor pawn from moving and letting the white pieces out. White continues to try to get those pieces out. And he finally plays d4, but in response Morphy plays bishop e3 and White resigns. Because of the threatened checkmate on h2. Even capturing this bishop and moving that bishop off of c1 finally will be too late. Because he will play rook takes h2 check, king to g1 and rook g2 checkmate. Okay, so a very fine game from Morphy, right? And a couple things that we can try to learn from this game. One would be in this position. The idea of queen d3 blockading, restraining the opponent's development, preventing your opponent from developing, is a very important chess technique. And the second thing I like is here his build-up in the next 2 moves, preparing queen takes f3, just putting his bishop on this unassuming square. But it's at least mobilizing, but I like how he just built up his development with these pieces here. So that's Morphy, the first great chess titan. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you around.